Hey, I'm Sloane Rosenthal from Hudson West. I'm one of the co-founders. I'm the West half. And along with my business partner, Meghan Babin, who's the Hudson side in the Hudson Valley, we'll be talking to you today a little bit about our yarn, about how the company got started, and about the patterns that we have in support of the yarn. So Hudson West opened its doors to the public in November 2019. We did a little soft launch at Rhinebeck, but we opened formally to the public in November of that year. So we've been around for a little over a year and a half now. And it really started from, two friends who were on kind of parallel paths in the industry who had a similar idea at the same time. So I was an independent designer before this, and I practiced law full-time alongside of designing, and Meghan was working in the craft space for some time in publishing. And we met when I designed a sweater for her for Interweave Knits quite some time ago. And both of us were really thinking about what was next for us in the industry. And I have been a super yarn geek from day one of my knitting life. I've been fascinated by kind of the material science of knitting and how yarn is made, and really was really searching for that perfect next yarn to make the kinds of clothes I wanted to wear everywhere. And we're so fortunate now that we live in such a golden age of yarn, and there's so many choices of what you want to knit with. And I really wanted to craft that just perfect yarn for the kinds of things that I wanted to design. And Meghan was on a similar search, and we were both talking to our wonderful mill owner, Mary Jean Packer at Battenkill Fibers, and she said, you guys are friends, why don't you do this together? So that was at Rhinebeck in 2018, and we traded samples of yarns that we were thinking about and decided to go for it. And so we spent the next year developing our first two bases and our first pattern collection, and then we opened our doors about a year later.
Hi everybody, it's Meghan Babin coming at you from Hudson West's East Coast headquarters, which is located in the lower Hudson Valley, just outside of New York City. It's also known as my home. Welcome to my home and my grid wall full of our beautiful yarn, forged and weld above my head there, all in a nice rainbow gradient with our neutrals just hanging out over here. Sloane just did a great job at introducing who we are and how we met. And now I'd like to tell you a little bit about our patterns. So as she said, I was the editor-in-chief of Interweave Knits from 2015 to 2018. And during that time, we met when she designed Tangled Up in Gray, which was in the fall 2017 issue of Interweave Knits. Just absolutely beautiful design that impressed me right away from the submission. And I just knew that she was a really special, talented designer who's very thoughtful about her construction and her cable choices, because that is her wheelhouse. She loves cables, and it's something that I love too, being a knitter who is drawn to traditional motifs made anew. And together we were able to form an aesthetic for Hudson West that spoke to both of us really well, that complemented both of our styles and preferences. So as of right now, we just released our spring 2021 collection, which feels amazing. We have released 7 full pattern collections so far since November of 2019, when we launched our autumn-winter premiere collection. We have produced 77 patterns total in just a short span of time, that run the gamut from women's wear to men's wear to everything in between. We are huge fans of beanies, both Sloane and I. So we are big fans of beanies, ranging from just simple ribbed beanies to cables to color work. So that's something that we have in great abundance that won't be stopping anytime soon. And we have been size inclusive from day one. Something that's very near and dear to my heart, being a plus size person, a plus size knitter. And during the time that I was working in publishing, the size inclusivity conversation hadn't really started in any significant way yet. And it was something that I've always felt personally excluded by, because I did not see pretty much any patterns available that were made for everybody. And so that is something that we have been focused on from the very beginning. So all of our patterns are sized to fit a 30 to 32 inch chest all the way up to a 64-inch chest. So our pattern ranges from anywhere between a 34-inch finished chest all the way. I think that some of them go all the way up to a 72 or a 74, depending on how the fit is. I'm actually wearing Cuffle right now by Alexis Winslow, who's one of our friends of the flock. I made mine in, I think I made the size 58 finished bust. My bust measures a 49 as of right now. And it fits me so well. I've worn this thing so much since I made it last winter that I've even slept in it a few times because it's so comfortable. But all of our patterns are sized for everybody. And it's something that we will continue to work on as we grow and expand to accommodate everybody. So we're always interested in feedback about our designs, but that's just a little bit about who we are and what we do. And you can see all of our collections and lookbooks and patterns on our website, and they're all available in print and as well as digital from our website and on Ravelry or any of the pattern platforms that our indie designers and partners have patterns for sale.
Hi, so now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our yarns and how they're made. So we make two yarns now. They're called Forge and Weld, and they're a worsted and a fingering weight version of the same blend of merino and Cortdale. So Forge here is the worsted weight, and this is Weld, the fingering weight, which is in this color called Ash, which is our natural light gray. We do 11 overdyed heathers right now, and then 3 naturals. We do the light gray, a dark gray called charcoal, and a kind of light oatmeal color called fawn. And again, these go from sheep to skein here in the US. All of our processing is done on the East Coast, and we source the merino from Colorado, New Mexico, because merino is a mountain sheep that likes those higher elevations. And then we source the Corriedale mainly from the Northeast corridor, but also a little bit from the Midwest as well. So one big question is, why merino and Corriedale? So everybody loves merino. Merino is the sheep knitters are most familiar with, and for good reason. Merino has quite high tensile strength relative to its softness. It's very soft, it's a familiar feeling, and it's plentiful. It's one of the most common fiber sheep in the world. It's readily available here in the US and outside the US, so everybody loves merino. But merino on its own can be a little fragile, right? We've all had merino sweaters that pill, that don't wear quite as well as we'd like, and we really wanted something that was gonna make heirloom quality garments. So something that would make garments that would really last. Because when we knit sweaters, and Megan and I are both pretty hardcore sweater knitters, it takes a long time, right? And you want those things to last and to be able to really wear them in your life. So a little bit of Corriedale, it turns out, goes a really long way towards enhancing durability and enhancing the quality of how your garments wear. So not only do they pill a little less, but they look sharper a little longer. It doesn't take a lot of Corriedale, and Corriedale's a medium wool sheep, so it's not particularly far down the kind of coarseness spectrum, right? Like some of the long wools. Corriedale's quite close to merino, and we buy very fine Corriedale, but it just adds a little bit more durability. And when we go to dye the yarn, it takes the dye a little bit differently, which adds more dimension to our colorways, which is something that we really love. As I mentioned in my intro, Megan and I were really looking for, how do we make a yarn that's going to make great garments? Both of us love to wear our hand knits, and we really want to wear things that give people that, oh my gosh, you made your sweater, not the, oh, you made your sweater reaction, because there's a world of difference between those two things, right? And we were looking for a yarn that was going to give us that kind of ready to wear inspired polish to our garments, and something that you could wear, in any setting, and not just that you could wear to walk your dog on Saturday morning. And everybody's got a place for those sweaters, and those sweaters were great, but that wasn't really what we were after. And then we really wanted to make that yarn responsibly with a traceable supply chain here in the US. Our yarns are spun at Battenkill Fibers in upstate New York, and they're spun in something called a semi-worsted system. So some of you may be familiar with the difference between worsted and woolen spun yarns. In a woolen spun system, the fibers are not combed before the yarn is spun, so they kind of poke off in all directions. So some of you are familiar with yarns like Shelter by Brooklyn Tweed or Quince's Owl. Those are both woolen spun. Whereas in a worsted spun, the fibers are all combed, so they're going in the exact same direction before the yarn is spun, and that gives the yarn a really smooth, round appearance. But it sacrifices some amount of bloom when you go to block the yarn because the fibers are just necessarily more organized and pointing in the same direction. So what we wanted was the best of both worlds, and a semi-worsted system really gets us that. It gets us the bloom and the airiness and the lightness of a woolen spun yarn. When you block our yarns, they bloom really beautifully and form a really cohesive fabric, but it's a little bit softer and more predictable and just, again, kind of more organized to handle than a woolen spun yarn. And it has a little bit more durability because, again, the fibers are pointing in a little bit more the same direction. So a semi-worsted system, you do a little bit of what's called pin drafting, and you comb the fibers a couple of times so they're going in the same direction, but not as much as you would do for a true worsted spun yarn. So again, we get a really good balance of, we get a little extra stitch definition and a little more pop to our cables, but we keep that lightness and that woolly bloom that makes the yarn have a really lovely hand to deal with. So that's sort of a special thing about our yarn and how it behaves, and it's going to be a little bit different from, say, a superwash merino, where you're very used to that real kind of roundness and, you know, really discernible plies. Our yarn is a 3-ply, which is quite balanced, and again, I think gives us a good kind of midpoint between, we get enough stitch definition and enough roundness to make the cables really pop and stand out, but you can still knit lace with it and it will open and bloom really beautifully. So it's, again, just one of those kind of nice midpoints. I think it makes really lovely stockinette fabric. I really love knitting cables with it. Some of you know I'm a cabled sweater knitter and designer kind of primarily, so the yarn had to be one that I was gonna love to knit cabled sweaters out of it. So that's still my favorite thing to do, but I really like making color work with it too. This sweater was made in weld. We've done a huge range of color work in both weights in our 2 color work collections. So it really kind of goes all over the map. But again, it's the same base, that same blend of domestic merino and Corriedale in both yarns. And then we dye on either the gray base or the fawn base, depending on kind of what color we're making and how much kind of gray fleck we're trying to get in the heathers. Our yarns are dyed down in North Carolina at Ultimate Textile, with some of the same folks who used to be at Maine Dye and the Saco River Dye House up in Maine. And then we do all of our packaging and labeling in South Jersey. So the whole supply chain is on the East Coast. Again, the fiber is sourced from all across the US, but our yarns are produced there. I'm out here in California and Megan's in the Hudson Valley, but the vast majority of our supply chain is in a relatively small area, which helps minimize our carbon footprint and makes it possible for us to be a little kinder to the environment as we are, you know, shipping large amounts of product kind of around the country.